Part 22. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 218. While Rog was having a fierce battle with MS Spring Water Goddess. Outside the pyramid building, Mr. Ninja King and Sauron were fighting together on the pyramid building under the night sky. After Sauron rushed out of the pyramid building, he saw outside that this was the area close to the top of the pyramid building. Of course, this is not surprising, because everyone has already reached the 9th floor. The scenery here is really spectacular, Sauron said, looking at the sky and surroundings. The current location is close to the top of the pyramid building, where you can look up at the stars and the moon in the night sky, and below you can see the large artificial seawater area around the pyramid building. And looking far away, you can see everything in the rainy city and the spectacular desert. Under the illumination of the moonlight and stars, everything seems peaceful and refreshing. Unfortunately, this is not a place for you to enjoy the scenery. After the sound sounded, Zorro looked to the right and saw Mr. King of Ninjas standing there. His black clothes looked even more concealing under the night sky. Those eyes observed the opponent like a bat. Sauron put the snow in his hand in front of his eyes, and it looked even sharper under the soft moonlight and starlight. It's a really good place. Fighting here is much better than in that hall. Well, let me see your abilities to the fullest, Sauron said. Me too, said Mr. Ninja King. The figure of Mr. Ninja King disappeared quickly, beating like a ghost. The appearance of this pyramid building is like a group of huge bricks. Mr. Ninja King can jump on these bricks as flexibly as flying. I really am a master assassin. I can't even achieve this kind of flexible movement, Sauron sighed. Sauron will not always passively let the opponent dominate the battle. Zorro quickly began to jump on the huge bricks outside the pyramid building, preparing to find an opportunity to attack Mr. Ninja King. The two chased each other, but whenever Zorro wanted to attack, Mr. Ninja King would always jump away more nimbly. The two jumped up and down, and finally jumped to the top of the pyramid building. The area at the top was very small, and here Zorro finally tracked the figure of Mr. Ninja King. Good chance. At this time, Sauron quickly pulled out the third knife and put it in his mouth. Three-sword style. Tornado. Zorro's body spun, his arms and the three katana swords in his mouth spun like tornadoes. The huge sword energy generated was really like a tornado, completely covering the top of the pyramid building. For the last while, the sword energy spread around, and everything returned to calm. But Zorro's face was still serious, and he didn't feel that any of the three katanas had hit him. The sword energy that diffused did not hit the opponent. Because the murderous aura is still there. Zorro suddenly looked up to the sky. I saw the area above, 20 meters above the pyramid building. That is, a figure is flying under the incomplete moon. If you look closely, it's Mr. Ninja King. At this time, Mr. Ninja King unfolded a portable gliding cloak behind him. The gliding cloak allowed him to fly away to avoid the attack when Sauron's sword energy flew across. It's really amazing. This kind of all-round attack using sword energy is extremely rare, Mr. Ninja King praised. Zorro looked at Mr. Ninja King above, who was using the gliding cloak, and said, it's really a skill that can reach the sky. He is worthy of being a ninja of Wano country. Mr. Ninja King said respectfully, thank you for the compliment. Although enemies are enemies, there is still a need for politeness between enemies who admire each other. Do you think you can avoid my attack like this? Sauron said suddenly. Yes, said Mr. Ninja King. He quickly felt the murderous aura about to erupt from Sauron below. This time, the two swords in Sauron's hands flew behind him like an eagle. The head is also lowered, and the whole person is like an eagle soaring with its wings. Sauron quickly took big steps with his legs, continued to jump, and finally rushed to the top of the pyramid building. Zorro concentrated his strength on both feet and jumped up vigorously. The whole person flew upwards quickly. At this time, Mr. Ninja King, who was under the incomplete moon, was wearing a gliding cloak and looked at Zoro flying up from below. Now Sauron is simply like an eagle flying into the sky. Those arms and the katana held tightly by both arms are the eagle's wings. Those legs are the eagle's talons. The mouth and head that bite the samurai sword are the beak and head of the eagle. This is Mr. Ninja King shouted in shock. Sauron stared upward, like an eagle hunting a bat. Eagle slash. Zoro's flying figure quickly passed by Mr. Ninja King. The latter's gliding cloak tore under the moon like a bat's wing. Sauron's figure continued to rush towards the direction of the moon. Against the background of the incomplete moonlight, Sauron is really a soaring eagle. Mr. Ninja King's body fell downwards. Sauron's figure turned around beautifully in the night sky under the moon. Like an eagle turning its back to the moon. Sauron's body fell under the force of gravity again. It finally landed on a masonry near the top of the pyramid building. Zoro lowered his arms, and took down the samurai sword from his mouth and retracted the scabbard. Closing his eyes, Zoro took a deep breath and then exhaled. He opened his eyes again and wiped the sweat off his forehead. "It's really a dangerous battle," Sauron said with lingering fear. Even for the blow just now, Sauron had tried his best to succeed. Xianglong Slash is also an extremely dangerous move. It is very difficult for Sauron to change direction during this attack, so if the opponent has a way to counter it, then he will undoubtedly die. Fortunately, everything is in the past. Just now, both the eagle's mouth and its wings successfully hit the opponent. But suddenly, a voice sounded. "You are amazing." The voice was a little tired, even severely frightened. But it has a tone of living from a catastrophe. Zoro knew very well that the owner of this voice was Mr. Ninja King, who was hit just now. That killing intent still exists. But it was changed to be under Sauron this time. Sauron looked down, and now he was standing near the top of the pyramid building, in the middle of the pyramid building below. I saw Mr. Ninja King, who had been shot down before, half kneeling there. Mr. Ninja King also seemed to be injured, half kneeling there. But he still has a strong will to fight. "Sure enough, you survived," Sauron said. "As a ninja, since you dare to use the gliding cloak, you naturally know how to save your life when you fall," Mr. Ninja King said. "This battle is not over." Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 219. Mr. Ninja King gritted his teeth and stood firm again with effort. He looked at Sauron near the top of the pyramid building, and his heart was filled with anger. Sauron's powerful attack just now injured him. If it weren't for the light armor under his black clothes, he would have died. Even though the light armor worn inside prevented his body from being cut open, those impacts could not be counteracted, and now he was aching inside his body. Relying on years of practice and a strong body to survive. But now he also admires Sauron very much. Including that he had encountered many powerful swordsmen in Wano country before, but none of them had Sauron's unique swordsmanship style. In addition to the rare three-sword style, there is also a fighting style that integrates everything. I have to admit that you are a powerful swordsman. The three-sword style is really a rare master. I think you are able to be where you are today, not only through hard work, but also through countless life and death breakthroughs, Mr. Ninja Dynasty above, Zoro said. Zoro looked at Mr. Ninja King, and said with the politeness of a swordsman, "Thank you for the compliment. I will definitely go to Wano country in the future. Meet those rumored and unheard of masters." Then Zoro swung the katana with both arms clenched again. "But today, I must get rid of you completely," Sauron said, and at the same time, his feet began to jump rapidly from various bricks and stones, heading straight towards Mr. Ninja King in the middle of the pyramid building. Mr. Ninja King still stood there and made no move. However, under this night sky, Mr. Ninja King has already prepared a weapon in his sleeve that can turn the situation around. Zoro was getting closer and closer, and he slashed at Mr. Ninja King with both swords from left to right. At this moment, Mr. Ninja King suddenly jumped away and jumped to the bricks further down. And did a somersault in mid-air. When his head was facing down, he was right in front of Sauron, who was pursuing him. Mr. Ninja King held something like a small speaker tightly in his hands. But the front end of this speaker-like thing is extremely small. This is the ninja weapon Fukia. Mr. Ninja King puffed up his mouth, aimed at Fukia's back and blew the gas violently. A hidden weapon like a steel needle shot out from the tip of Fukia. After all, it was night at this time, and the visibility was extremely low. In addition, Zorro sprinted very quickly. Although Zorro realized that something was wrong at the last moment, it was already too late. Fukia's steel needle hit Zorro's chest just below the neck to the left. Zorro realized that he had been hit by the opponent's hidden weapon. But it is too late now. Mr. Ninja King also continued to jump towards the bricks below with exaggerated movements, and did not dare to stop until he was far away from Zorro. Successful. Mr. Ninja King stopped on a piece of brick, gritted his teeth, and his face was covered with sweat. The wounds inside his body were aching slightly after being injured by Sauron's eagle slash just now. Now this desperate and high-intensity action made it a little unbearable for him. But it was finally successful. What Fuya shot was a steel needle coated with poison. This is also one of the ace weapons of the ninja. Fukia is small but has a very short range. Can only be used within 10 meters. And take your time. Once hit, the opponent will have a toxic attack in the next few tens of seconds, making the body paralyzed and difficult to move. Like ordinary people will even die, some masters can survive. Mr. the Ninja King looked up at Zorro. Although the faint light under the night sky couldn't see more clearly, he looked a little tired when he saw Sauron. Sauron, who had just made an attack like a flying eagle spreading its wings, suddenly half-kneeled on the masonry where he was. More importantly, Mr. Ninja King felt that the murderous aura generated by fighting that Zorro exuded was weakening. "What on earth did you use?" Zorro gritted his teeth and asked. Mr. the King of Ninja looked at Sauron calmly. "There is no doubt that the battle situation will be reversed now. I used a steel needle, but it contained paralyzing poison. You have fought for a long time and will not be killed," Mr. Ninja King said calmly. Sauron gritted his teeth to resist the numbness and pain in his body, and stood up again. He put his hand on the left side of his chest and pulled out the poisonous needle. Zorro then raised his head and looked at Mr. Ninja King below. Seeing this situation, Mr. Ninja King couldn't help but feel shocked. At this time, Sauron was standing on the bricks outside the pyramid building, with the waning moon and stars setting him off above. Sauron's eyes looked at him as if emitting a light. This seemed to be a signal to fight to the death. "You used a poisonous hidden weapon. This is the fighting style of a ninja. I won't blame you for this. But you have to tell me how long I can hold on," Sauron asked word by word. Mr. the Ninja King was intimidated by Sauron's momentum. The opponent was an ordinary swordsman, clearly the king of hell who came out of hell. "Okay, I'll tell you," Mr. Ninja King said. "Based on the situation of my fight with you, your body can still sustain it for less than 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, you will no longer be able to move," Mr. Ninja King said. 3 minutes, okay. Zorro closed his eyes slightly. Mr. Ninja King looked at Zorro and at the same time prepared his weapon. "The battle will be over in 3 minutes, Zorro said. Zorro quickly put away the Yukino in his hand, leaving only Kitoru with a samurai sword in the end. He clenched his hands and rushed toward Mr. Ninja King. Mr. Ninja King quickly pulled out his ninja sword. Zorro came from above, and Mr. Ninja King came from below. The two men had a fierce confrontation. Clang made a harsh sound, and the katana and ninja swords exchanged fiercely. Since one of the two men was injured internally and the other was poisoned, the blow was now evenly matched. With amazing speed and agility, the two fought fiercely on the bricks and stones outside the pyramid building. "You are really holding on now." "No, it is the final explosion," Mr. Ninja King said while fighting. "You can wait until my body is poisoned and I can't move before you act." "Why are you fighting me?" Sauron said. It was another blow. After the two knives collided, the force bounced the two people away. But the two waved their weapons again and rushed forward to fight together. Mr. Ninja King said, "That's because this final battle is the dignity of anyone who advocates force. So I want to fight you." Onitoru in Sauron's hand fought fiercely with the opponent's ninja sword. His face was covered with sweat, because the poison in his body and force to fight made his body load surprisingly huge. "Okay, then let's make a bet on who can win," Sauron said boldly. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 221. Zoro looked at the medicine bottle that Mr. Ninja King took out and took it with his hand. Zoro then uncorked the small medicine bottle and poured the mung bean-sized pills into his mouth. Now Sauron's body is close to the limit, and the poison has highly invaded the internal organs and blood. The pill quickly melted in the gastric juice, and quickly penetrated into every part of Sauron's body. Sauron sat down and closed his eyes. A feeling of coolness quickly spread through the body for a while. Sauron felt that every part of his body was changing. Whether it's in the blood, the internal organs or the senses. At this time everything is becoming peaceful quickly. The numbness and pain before gradually disappeared from the body. When Sauron fought and won outside the pyramid building, inside the pyramid building, Rog and Ms Spring Water Goddess are in a fierce battle. Roger, come on. Usopp dances with Chopper and Luffy. Clang clang. The Kinkan bamboo spear in Rog's hand was exchanged with the axe in Ms Spring Water Goddess's hand. Rog was really surprised that the Ms Spring Water Goddess in front of him not only had these three powerful axes, but she could even swing the axes so freely. This fighting style is also full of holiness. Okay, I want to ask, Rog said, pulling away again. Ms the goddess of spring water holds the iron axe tightly in her right hand, ready to continue fighting at any time. Okay, let's talk, Ms Spring Water Goddess still said softly. Rog looked directly at Ms Spring Water Goddess and asked, how on earth do you use these three axes? How did you get them? I would like to ask you about the origin of these weapons. Ms the gentle and holy face of the Spring Water Goddess was still expressionless. She looked at the gold axe and silver axe held in her left arm and put the iron axe on her left arm with her right arm. Ms the goddess of spring water looked at the three axes and said calmly, these three axes are actually weapons unearthed in ancient times. They are not made by modern people. Rog looked at Ms Spring Water Goddess. Sure enough, these three axes are not items made by modern people. Rather, it is an ancient artifact. Ms the goddess of spring water continued, you were very surprised at the beginning, why I have such a weapon. Because I was born on the magic island of the Grand Line. Going back to ancient times before the world government was established, the magic island has produced many great magicians. They can control the wind and rain and can control all things. But everything has its time of decline. The magic island went through a huge internal war in ancient times, which led to the death of a large number of magicians and the loss of magic secrets. Many ancient powerful magic items were buried underground by many people who were unwilling to fall into the hands of the enemy. Later, the strength of the surviving magicians was greatly reduced. However, in the future, some powerful magic weapons made by the great magicians of ancient times were unearthed. The three axes in my hand, the golden axe, the silver axe and the iron axe, are the magic weapons made by the ancient magicians excavated. You have also seen that the iron axe can generate and manipulate wind, and the silver axe can generate and manipulate ice, and golden axes can generate and manipulate flames. But these all require a strong ability to control magic, and it took me many years to be able to use these things proficiently. In addition to being able to issue large-scale and long-range attacks, all three axes are able to make the person who wields them have the fighting ability comparable to a powerful warrior. Ms. The goddess of spring water said all these things carefully. Rog looked at the three axes again at this time, whether it was a gold axe, a silver axe or an iron axe, they all had an ancient aura at this time. Take a closer look at these three axes and there are some unique inscriptions on them. It was a complex inscription that modern people could not understand. Those are probably spells of ancient magic. So that's what happened, Roger said. The opponent turned out to be a magician, and the three axes were ancient magic weapons. No wonder the opponent is so powerful. Ms. The goddess of spring water picked up the golden axe again and said, "Okay, then are you still willing to fight with me?" Rog was silent for a moment, and said, "I will not be intimidated by magic. Because magic is also a kind of power, and no power can be truly invincible." At this time, Usopp and the others quickly cheered and said, "Well said, Rogue. Defeat her." Ms. The goddess of spring water said, "You are really not afraid of anything. Well, since you are like this, then I will fully release the power of the three axes." Rog held the Kinkin bamboo spear tightly, and said, "I'm completely happy to accompany you." Ms. The spring water goddess raised the golden axe and whispered some ancient spells in her mouth. "It's like a long ago thing is resurrected." Rog looked at the golden axe intently. Usopp and Chopper also looked at the golden axe with sweat on their faces. Flames began to be generated around the golden axe, from the initial heat emission to the burst of sparks, and then to burning flames. Immediately afterwards, the flames grew stronger and stronger. Even Rog could see a terrible face in the flames of the golden axe. That's probably a demon from the abyss. This golden axe seems to be able to summon the power of hell to the world. Ms. The goddess of spring water holds this golden axe. At this time, her holy temperament has changed, and she has become more murderous. "Go, hellfire!" cried Ms. The goddess of the springs. The flames on the golden axe shot towards Rog, but what was shocking was that these flames actually formed a rotating fire dragon to attack Rog. How could this happen? Rog ran away quickly. The flame attack of the golden axe was only in a straight line before, but now it is a fire dragon that can be tracked. Rog ran hard in the hall, but he couldn't escape the fire dragon's pursuit. The fire dragon can turn and track Rogue just like a real dragon. Rog ran desperately, but couldn't avoid the fire dragon's pursuit. At this moment, Rog gritted his teeth, feeling that he was already unable to fly. But out of the corner of his eye, he glanced at Usopp and the others in this hall. "No, you need to lure this thing away." Rog rushed towards the window that Sauron and the others had rushed out of before. He also rushed out. Continuing to fight in the hall will bring disaster to Usopp and the others. Roger rushed out of the pyramid building and went outside. The outside of the pyramid building is still under the clear night sky, with moonlight and starlight shining on the bricks and stones of the pyramid building. Rog quickly jumped on these bricks and stones. The fire dragon also rushed out, but it dissipated halfway through the chase. "It seems that things formed by this kind of magic also have energy limitations," Rog said. Immediately afterwards, I saw a burst of white light floating out from the feet of Ms. Spring Water Goddess. Ms. The Spring Goddess landed on a piece of brick. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 222. Roger was also standing on a brick more than 10 meters away from her. Looking at Ms. Spring Water Goddess, Rog said, "Okay, let's fight here." "Don't worry, you can't defeat me," Ms. Spring Water Goddess said. At this time, Ms. Spring Water Goddess completely changed from her previous gentle style and became full of murderous aura. The golden axe in her hand was still burning. Hell's fire. Ms. The Spring Water Goddess launched another fire attack. Another dragon-like flame flew out of the golden axe to chase Rog. Rog turned around and quickly jumped on the pyramid bricks to avoid it. Because Rog was wearing heavy walnut armor, he couldn't move too fast. Fortunately, although this fire dragon has tracking capabilities, its speed is average. At this time, on the ground below the pyramid building, Sauron's body has basically recovered after taking the medicine given to him by Mr. Ninja King. He felt something strange around him and opened his eyes again. I saw a fire dragon on top of the pyramid building. The dragon made of flames was chasing a person. It was Roger who was being chased. I didn't expect that the opponent he met would be so evil, Sauron said to himself. At this time, Mr. Ninja King, who had been seriously injured and was still lying next to Zorro, also looked at the fire dragon and the chased Rog. "Ms, the god of spring water, she is using those terrible magics again," Mr. Ninja King said in a low voice. Sauron looked at him in confusion and said, "Magic?" Mr. Ninja King said, "Yes, magic. Mr. the god of spring water is a magician from the magic island on the Grand Route. She possesses 3 incredible ancient magic weapons, those 3 axes." Sauron looked at Rog again, and said, "Oh, Rog, you have suffered a lot." Rog was chased by the fire dragon. This time the fire dragon's energy seemed to be greater than before, and the chase was now longer. Rog was pursued, and he quickly used the energy of the plant fruit to inject the kinkan bamboo spear in his hand. A huge leaf grew from the front end of the kinkan bamboo spear, but it was the same as a huge sickle. "Since this is the case, I will try it with a bamboo sickle." Rog turned around and quickly spun the bamboo sickle in his hand. Because the bamboo sickle has a sickle part this time, it has developed some wind power. The fire dragon is almost exhausted after a long period of chasing. The dragon finally hit Rog's spinning bamboo sickle. The flame finally burst and flew around. The sickle part of the bamboo sickle in Rog's hand was covered with flames, and it went out after burning for a while. Rog took a deep breath and looked at Ms Spring Water Goddess again. Ms the goddess of spring water put away the golden axe and said, "It seems that you are still not easy to deal with." Ms the spring goddess picked up the silver axe again. She raised the silver axe this time, and began to whisper the ancient spell in her mouth. Frost first formed on the silver axe, then it froze and became extremely hard. "Okay, ice sword." Ms the goddess of spring water suddenly waved her silver axe, and 10 sharp swords made of ice were quickly produced from it. These sharp swords are rough in shape, but they basically look like long swords, but they are still extremely sharp. 10 ice swords quickly stabbed at Rog. Facing these rapidly approaching ice swords, Rog had an ominous premonition, and quickly jumped onto a brick below. The bricks and stones here are huge, and Rog can just avoid those ice swords here. Rog only heard the sound of those ice swords hitting the masonry. Soon all these ice swords hit the masonry where Rog was just now. At this time, Rog quickly stood up and looked at the location of the masonry. I saw that it had turned into a large lump of ice. Moreover, the positions hit by the 2 ice swords that had missed their stabs also turned into 2 smaller ice lumps. Roger shuddered suddenly. The ice sword shot by the silver axe can actually freeze the target it hits. Even if these ice swords cannot assassinate the opponent, they can still trap the opponent. That is to say, even if the ice sword does not penetrate the armor, he will be frozen into a lump of ice. It was horrible. Roger gasped and said. Ms the goddess of spring water continued to use the silver axe and continued to use this powerful magic. But no one can see that her neck and forehead are full of sweat at this moment. There is a great price to pay for using any great power. She is also overloaded with these ancient weapons and using this kind of magic. In fact, the battle now is a race against time. But Ms the goddess of spring water knows this very well and wants to pretend to be strong. Hold on until the end and kill Rog first. Ms the goddess of spring water is now full of power, but this is all at the end of her efforts. Rog hurriedly dodged on the bricks and stones, and it was even more necessary to dodge like this. In this case, once you are hit, the consequences will be very serious. At this time, Ms Spring Water Goddess also moved her position. She possesses short-distance levitation magic to move positions, and after a while of spells, she is moving her body. Like floating. Although she has become full of murderous aura from now on, her long golden hair flutters and her white dress flutters, she is still a powerful goddess. Ms. The spring water goddess found a position to attack Rog again. After a while of ancient spells, the silver axe she held was covered with a burst of hard ice. Ice sword. 10 more ice swords appeared in the air and stabbed Rog. Roger was jumping onto a piece of brick at this time. At this time, I saw the ice sword stabbing over. Rog rolled violently and landed on a piece of brick below. The ice swords flew over one by one. But there was a sound of ice colliding, and Rog's leg was hit by an ice sword. After the ice sword hit the walnut-heavy armor, it immediately shattered and turned into a large lump of ice. The ice wrapped Roger's legs and began to spread to more places. Oh no, Rog's lower body was covered with ice. However, we simply took advantage of the situation and continued to roll towards the lower bricks. Rog used the bamboo sickle in his hand to continue rolling himself towards the masonry below. During the rolling, there was a sound of ice shattering for a while. The ice on Roger's body shattered because it hit the masonry. If an ordinary person was frozen, their flesh would be broken into pieces if they collided like this. However, Rog's walnut-heavy armor successfully prevented Rog from being damaged. In this way, several bricks and stones fell down continuously, and finally all the ice cubes were smashed. It's really painful, Roger said, standing up. Just now, I fell on these huge bricks and stones continuously. Although the armor avoided most of the damage, it was still uncomfortably concussive. Rog looked at Ms. Spring Water Goddess again, and saw that Ms. Spring Water Goddess put away the silver axe again and used the iron axe. Ms. the goddess of spring water raised the iron axe. She muttered a spell softly. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 223. Ms. The spring water goddess whispered an ancient spell. A gust of wind was generated around the iron axe, blowing away the surrounding airflow. The wind kept getting stronger, tearing apart the air around it. With iron axe as the center, a tornado began to form. The tornado became bigger and bigger, blowing the long golden hair and clothes of Ms. Spring Water Goddess into the air. Rog looked at the increasingly powerful tornado, feeling deeply uneasy in his heart. Ms. the goddess of spring water shouted loudly, "The tornado will destroy him." The tornado formed around the iron axe quickly attacked Rog. This tornado moved from about meters above Rog. But something even more shocking happened. The huge bricks along the way began to be crushed. Although the masonry was not completely crushed due to its huge size, many cracks and shaped stones were also crushed. The situation is not good. Rog realized that the situation was not good and fled quickly. The tornado was clearly a meat grinder, and Rog's own walnut-heavy armor had been severely damaged after the previous fierce battle. If it is hit again like this, there will definitely be a very high chance of being destroyed. What makes Rog even more troublesome is that the tornado storm can keep the things involved in it. Parts of the previously crushed masonry were further shattered inside by the storm. In the end it all turned into fine dust. Once it is involved, even if it is not smashed immediately, it will be wiped out after a long time. Rog kept running away on the masonry, but this tornado also chased Rog intelligently. The bricks and stones were continuously destroyed along the way, and the shattered bricks and stones were partially involved in the tornado, and then changed from the size of footballs to the size of fists, then to the size of eggs, and finally to the size of soybeans, and then, dust. The huge power inside the tornado is enough to crush a tornado. On the ground below the pyramid building, Sauron had been observing the battle. Now the toxins in his body are mostly reduced. He looked at the tornado storm. The scale of this tornado storm was similar to that of his Santo-style tornado, but it was more powerful. And can also track targets. Hey, it's always a copycat if it's not popular these days. Sauron murmured. Rog was being followed all the way panting, and the tornado storm behind him chased him, and now he was only about 5 meters away. Rog is now thinking in his heart whether this tornado storm also has an energy limit. Everything has energy limitations, whether it is strength, explosive gunpowder, or even this kind of magic, there are energy limitations. The key is whether you can avoid being attacked before the energy is exhausted. Zheng. Now for Rog, he has to work hard to stick to this. After a long time, winning is yourself. MS Spring Water Goddess, who was standing on the pyramid building, now looked at Tornado and Rog, who was being chased. She was even more anxious than Rog at this time. On the surface, she remained calm, but in fact, she had almost exhausted all her energy. Using all 3 axes requires a huge amount of energy. Although she was once a very outstanding young magician on the Magic Island. But mastering these 3 axes requires unimaginable energy. After all, they are powerful magic weapons forged by great magicians in ancient times. If the tornado finally fails to hit Rog and kills him, then the situation is extremely bad. Rog continued to avoid the tornado storm, and the tornado storm roared for a while, and Rog suddenly turned around, only to see that the tornado storm was more than 2 meters away. Oops, now we need to find a way. Rog jumped and ran on the bricks, but the tornado behind him was still as fast as ever. However, Rog seemed to have discovered something. The tornado storm continued to involve the masonry and smash them, but after this, the tornado storm seemed to shrink a bit. Rog thought about this question. Could it be that the more things involved, the weaker the tornado would be? Or maybe the tornado storm keeps sucking things into it and drains its energy. Thinking of this, Rog's mind flashed. Okay, that's it. Rog started running towards the bottom of the pyramid building this time, instead of jumping and running between the bricks and stones on the top of the pyramid building as before. Rog rushed to the ground below the pyramid building in one breath, and quickly ran towards the moat. The powerful tornado storm behind him has been chasing after him. There is a moat ahead, but at this time Rog needs to find a way to successfully wander on this river. Roger took out another vine. This one is one of Rog's backup vine whips. Vine whip. Weaving boat. Rog transferred a large amount of plant fruit energy to vine whip Wenzheng. The cane whips quickly began to change, binding and knotting each other. In the end, it turned into a boat with a length of 2 meters. But it's woven. Roger quickly stood on the woven boat. Rog activated the plant fruit energy in his body and injected it into the weaving ship. When Zheng's weaving ship started to move automatically. The tornado behind him also chased Rog and continued to attack. When Rog was driving a boat made of vine whips on the moat, the tornado behind him was already less than 1 meter in height. But at this time, the tornado followed Rog's woven boat into the moat. The huge ability of the tornado to draw up all the water in the moat. Behind Roger's weaving boat, a rotating water column was constantly swinging. It's really great. Roger was very happy to see the huge water column behind him. Tornado storms pull more and more water inside. Rog drove the weaving boat and kept moving forward. The longer he chased in the moat, the more water the tornado storm would draw into it. Although tornadoes are powerful, involving so much water consumes their limited energy. The water level of the moat is also constantly falling. The swirling water column formed by the water involved in the tornado storm is already more than 10 meters high and more than 3 meters wide, and it is still expanding. Some giant banana crocodiles living in the sea water below the pyramid building also found that something happened above, and a huge banana crocodile rushed to the surface of the moat. The giant banana crocodile hit the tornado just as it rushed onto the surface of the moat. The powerful force of the tornado quickly crushed the giant banana crocodile's huge body into pieces. The huge power of the tornado that could swallow everything tore the flesh and blood of the giant banana crocodile alive, and then merged into the rotating water column. Wenzheng. The water column of the tornado became bigger and bigger, until it was already 5 meters thick. At this time, the power of the tornado storm itself has reached its limit. Rog looked back and saw that the water column formed by the tornado had stopped pursuing. It just spins more slowly. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 224. The current tornado storm has already used all its strength to maintain this water column. The rotation speed of the water column is also constantly weakening. This water column is extremely spectacular, and now Rog himself can't wait to go into the water column to enjoy the fun of spinning. The power of the tornado storm had reached its limit, and the original power suddenly dissipated. The water column suddenly scattered and collapsed under the action of gravity. Roger looked at the collapsing water column, and the sea water in the water column and the flesh and blood of the giant banana crocodile splashed into the surrounding area together. Even Rog was splashed all over. "It's really cool," Rog said. After seeing the tornado collapse, Ms. Spring Water Goddess, who was standing on the bricks of the pyramid building, could no longer hold back her physical exhaustion. Holding on until now has made her extremely exhausted. Ms. the goddess of spring water suddenly knelt down. She then raised her head and looked at Roger at the moat. "Am I losing?" "No, I have to give it a last try," Ms. the spring water goddess said. Ms. the spring water goddess gritted her teeth and stood up, then placed the iron axe, the silver axe, and the gold axe on the ground in front of her. Ms. the goddess of spring water began to whisper the ancient mantra. After successfully breaking the tornado storm, Rog jumped from the woven boat back to the ground below the pyramid building, and restored the braiding boat into a vine whip. The right hand holds the bamboo sickle tightly, and the left hand holds the rattan whip tightly. Rog now looked towards the middle area of the pyramid building, where Ms. Spring Water Goddess was sitting on a piece of brick. It's like chanting a spell. Rog was also a little tired after the fierce battle. But for some reason, he seemed to feel that the other party was about to lose his strength. Suddenly, 3 objects flew up in front of Ms. Spring Water Goddess. It is the golden axe, the silver axe and the iron axe. The 3 axes all come with their own magical energy. The golden axe is surrounded by flames, the silver axe is surrounded by ice, and the iron axe is surrounded by wind. The magic energy around the 3 axes is getting stronger and stronger. Ms. the goddess of spring water now looks quite crazy under the light of the fire. That's probably not her will anymore, but the will of the magical energy brought by the 3 axes. I am afraid it is a kind of energy that can destroy everything. Rog looked at her and the 3 axes. These powerful magical energies would produce shocking destructive power. Fire, ice, wind. The Trinity. A very terrifying voice shouted from the mouth of Ms. Spring Water Goddess. The blazing flames on the golden axe, the hard ice on the silver axe, the fierce wind on the iron axe. The 3 flew higher into the sky together, and then quickly merged hundreds of meters above the 3 axes. The 3 forces merged together like a vortex. But what is extremely shocking is that these 3 forces did not restrain and destroy each other. Instead, they maintained certain differences. Not only fused together, but also did not restrain and devour each other. This is the powerful magic of the fusion of 3 axes. This spectacular sight shocked everyone. In the rainy city, some people came out at night. They stopped in shock when they saw the magnificent sight over the pyramid building, and then started running in that direction to watch the magnificent sight. On the ground of the pyramid building, Sauron and Mr. Ninja King also saw this spectacular sight. They were amazed by the water column formed by the tornado storm before, and now the magic of the fusion of these 3 powers shocked them even more. "This is really a rare spectacle in the world," Zorro said with emotion. Ms. the goddess of spring water. I have never seen her use this kind of magic. However, her 3 axes are believed to be ancient magic weapons. They are powerful. This must be the powerful magic energy formed by those three axes Mr. The way of the Ninja King. In the hall on the 9th floor of the pyramid building, Usopp, Chopper and Luffy all rushed to the window to see this spectacular sight. "Wow, it's so beautiful," Luffy shouted. "What is this? How can it be so spectacular?" Chopper said with a surprised look on his face. "Such a spectacular sight, even Captain Usopp has never seen it before," Usopp said in shock. In the hall on the 10th floor of the pyramid building, Mr. 1 and MS stood by the window with both hands on their hands, watching this spectacular scene. MS looked out the window at the spectacular scenery while drinking red wine with her fingers. "This is the power of the spring water goddess," MS pointed with both hands. "No, this is strictly the power of the three axes in her hand," Mr. 1 said. MS looked at him sideways with both fingers and asked, "I have seen those three axes before. They really have such huge power." Mr. 1 looked intently at the fusion of magic energy outside the window and said, "Those three axes are the three magic weapons of the great ancient magicians unearthed on the magic island in the Grand Route. They contain infinite power." MS looked at the spectacular scenery outside the window with both hands. "Just three axes have such a huge power. It really makes people feel that everything in this world is unimaginable. The world is so big that people will never be able to see it," MS said with both hands and fingers. Mr. 1 said calmly, "There is nothing strange about this. Even nature has given birth to all things in the world, even things like devil fruit. So it is nothing to see these strange things. Yes, we also have magical power. But since this MS spring water goddess has such great power, why does she always seem to be afraid of something?" MS pointed with both hands. "She is afraid of losing control of her power. Those three axes are weapons from ancient times. They were made using the magic and energy of the great magicians of ancient times. I'm afraid she can't really understand how much terrible magic is contained in them. Master it and even understand it. If she doesn't operate it properly, she may be revolted," Mr. 1 said earnestly. The expression on MS's fingers seemed to become a little happier, and she drank down the red wine in the glass in her hand. "It seems that everything has advantages and disadvantages. It's like eating a devil fruit but not being able to go into the sea. No powerful power comes without a price." MS pointed with both hands. This slim beauty took out the pipe again and started smoking. Rog, who was under the pyramid building, looked up at the powerful fusion of these three magical energies in the air. The three magical energies of fire, ice, and wind are constantly rotating and merging. Three kinds of energy that seem completely unrelated to each other and even restrain each other can actually be fused together like this. Is this the powerful power of ancient magic weapons? Rog looked at this power and asked. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 225. The three magical energies are continuously fused, forming a huge spiral-like energy mixture. In this spiral, the three energies of fire, ice, and wind are surprisingly distinct. MS, the goddess of spring water, controlled three axes. Her last energy was concentrated on these three axes to use the trinity of magic attacks. "I will completely eliminate you this time," MS Spring Water Goddess said with a crazy murderous aura. Fire, ice, wind, the trinity. After rotating in the air and fully integrating together, they finally formed a huge spiral that was 30 meters long and 5 meters wide. MS, the goddess of spring water, chanted another ancient spell on the three axes. Trinity, destroy the enemy. A huge spiral rushed from the sky above the pyramid building to Rog, who was standing on the ground. Rog saw this terrifying scene, and a spiral of fire, ice, and wind rushed towards him. The huge spiral of magical energy rushed towards Rog while spinning. The three powerful energies seemed to roar together. At this time, Rog faced an unprecedentedly strong attack. At this time, Rog had no other choice. Well, just use that method. Roger decided to put all his eggs in one basket. Now such a powerful attack is almost impossible to avoid. Rog used the plant fruit energy in his whole body, and the green light quickly spread to the walnut-heavy armor outside. Under the influence of the plant fruit energy, the walnut-heavy armor began to shake. The head, upper body, and lower body of the original walnut-heavy armor began to change shape. Quickly joined together into a solid one. The shape is very much like a statue with bodies joined together. It's just the outline of a rough armor. Just like figurines. Walnut armor defense form. Armor figurines. The walnut-heavy armor turned into an armor figurine-like form. This form's defense and thickness are further enhanced. The huge spiral is already in sight. Rog inside the armored figurines was very calm. Whether it can survive depends entirely on this pair of armor figurines. Helix finally rushed to the front of the armored figurines. Immediately afterwards, there was an explosion. The three energies of fire, ice, and wind intersect and wreak havoc. Blow up the area where Rog is located. Even the pyramid building next to it was affected. The remaining river water in the moat was blown up and set off huge waves. Ice cubes, flames, strong winds, and all kinds of things formed by magical energy are covering each other alternately here. Sauron and Mr. Ninja King had already hid behind a brick near the pyramid building to avoid the destructive force. Usopp and the others on the 9th floor of the pyramid building couldn't help but turn their heads to avoid the impact. The onlookers in the rainy land who could see this spectacular scene were all scared back. Mr. 1 and MS in the hall on the 10th floor of the pyramid building were also staring at the explosion with both fingers. MS's fingers were shocked because the pipe in her hand fell to the ground. Even Mr. 1, who had always remained calm-faced, had a twitch on his face. "What a terrible explosion," Mr. 1 said with emotion. The violent explosion lasted for nearly 10 seconds and finally ended, but the leftover effects were everywhere. Now the ground beside the pyramid building is full of broken ice, burning flames, and some turbulent air currents. Where Rog was standing just now, a large crater was blasted out, surrounded by broken ground. The pyramid building was affected, and many bricks and stones were also destroyed. The water in the moat was blown out, and some of it even froze. Even some of the ice cubes contained chunks of giant banana crocodile. Behind a brick in the pyramid building, Sauron and Mr. Ninja King are hiding here. This huge masonry protected them from harm. Is it over?" Zoro said as he stood up with great effort. He looked around and saw a mess everywhere. Broken bricks, crushed ice, unburned flames, and some remaining wind quickly blown away. "Where is Mr. Ninja King?" Zoro also looked aside. Just now, he and Mr. Ninja King quickly hid here. "I'm fine." Mr. Ninja King walked over from a nearby brick. Sauron's eyes swept to Rog's position just now. Rog's location is extremely messy. A large crater appeared on the ground, and the ground within a few dozen meters around it was shattered. "Didn't see Roger." Zoro's face became serious and he said, "Did something happen to him?" On the side of the hall window on the 9th floor of the pyramid building, Usopp, Chopper, and Luffy all looked at the messy scene below. "Wow, this place is really devastated," Luffy exclaimed. Chopper looked at the messy scene below and quickly asked Usopp, "Usopp, how is Rogue?" Usopp was pulling down the goggles on his head and putting them on, and was constantly observing the scene below. "Wait, Rogue hasn't been found yet," Usopp said. In Usopp's goggles, there is no trace of Rogue. Inside the lobby on the 10th floor of the pyramid building, Mr. 1 and MS used their fingers to discuss the following things. "What a terrifying power," MS sighed with her fingers. "This is also my first time to see the fusion power of those three axes," Mr. 1 said. MS looked at Mr. 1 with both fingers and asked, "I have a question. How did Crocodile get them? These guys are no worse than senior agents, but their numbers are not obvious." Mr. 1 was silent for a moment and said, "Crocodile has always been good at hiding things in the dark. On the surface, Zheng appointed a group of senior agents. but in addition, he secretly recruited some special agents. That is, Mr. the King of Ninjas and powerful people like MS Spring Water Goddess. Don't forget that in terms of the command system, they only take orders from Crocodile and MS All Sunday. We have never had the right to mobilize them. The first defense of this pyramid building is to cooperate with us. Strictly speaking, we are equal to them, not superiors or subordinates. After listening to this, MS's two fingers showed an expression of understanding and said, Crocodile is really secretive. He has also won over so many powerful people secretly. In addition, he has purchased a large number of advanced weapons and equipment manufactured by various countries and even world governments. With all kinds of treasures, it's no wonder that the actual strength of Baroque Studio is far greater than what is shown on the books. It's good to know, but I think even if MS Spring Water Goddess successfully eliminated the armored man just now, they won't be able to hold on anymore. Because she and Mr. Ninja King have already failed Mr. One Road. At this time, the goddess of spring water is now standing on the bricks. The three axes quickly returned to their normal state after successfully launching the Trinity attack. The fire, ice, and wind above all dissipated. MS the goddess of spring water showed a smile on her face. She won and was already exhausted. MS the goddess of spring water suddenly fell down on the masonry, and the three axes, the gold axe, the silver axe, and the iron axe all fell on the masonry. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 226. Under the pyramid building, there is a mess. The nearby moat was also thrown with water, and there was ice everywhere that was frozen. Even beyond the moat, into the rainy streets and urban areas further away, there are brick fragments and ice blocks that were blown up. The people in the rainy land who were still watching before were all scared and hurried back. Those who don't understand the situation may explode again. It's terrifying. How could there be such a terrible explosion? Isn't that the pyramid building? The industrial headquarters of the national hero Crocodile? How could this happen? Could it be an enemy? It seemed like someone was fighting there just now. The people are very scared and confused, but they generally believe that they should flee to a safe place now. Beside a house, there were several bricks and stones and a strange object thrown over. The object's face was completely disfigured by the explosion. And there are many cracks on it, but the texture of this object is walnut. Inside the object, Roger, who was in a coma, felt a burst of pain in his body. Here. Rog looked around. It was pitch black, but there were still some cracks that could penetrate light. Now Rog is inside the armor figurines that were blown away. Just now Rog was quick to use his wisdom and used the second form of the walnut armor in addition to the combat form, which is the figurine form used when saving his life. The walnut armor becomes highly integrated in the figurine form. And the defense is greatly increased. At least 3 times as much as before. In this case, although it is impossible to move, it can resist the opponent's attack with its super strong defense. Of course, it also depends on the person. Just now, MS Spring Water Goddess used a Trinity attack, integrating the magical energy of the 3 axes into one. However, because MS Spring Water Goddess herself did not have complete control over the 3 axes and only used this attack in a very limited way, the Trinity was greatly compromised. Another point is that although the Trinity combines fire, ice, and wind, its attack is a ranged explosion attack. Otherwise, Rog would not dare to use this blink. If this move is used in front of Mr. One, the opponent can still find a way to cut through the armored figurines and kill Rog. It's really a narrow escape. Rog breathed heavily. Rog is already highly exhausted now. Pushing around, I felt that the armor figurine had been almost shattered by the attack just now. Or it may have been shattered, but fortunately it was not directly killed by the explosion, otherwise it would have been reduced to nothing. But the associated concussion made Rog very uncomfortable and suffered many injuries. Rog gritted his teeth and worked hard to mobilize the plant fruit energy in his body to disarm the armored figurines. After the armor figurines were released, Rog finally saw the night sky again. The stars and the waning moon in the sky are extremely shining. The dry air in the night sky is also very refreshing to breathe. Rog looked around again, and the pyramid building was hundreds of meters away from him. I was blown into the city by the explosion just now. After a short rest, Roger tried to stand up. There was a pain in his body, and Roger gritted his teeth to hold on. That blow just now must have exhausted the opponent's energy, Rog said. I knew very well just now that the attack by MS Spring Water Goddess also consumed a lot of energy. At that time, she was visibly trembling on the masonry. Under the pyramid building, Sauron and Mr. Ninja King walked to the destroyed and messy explosion area. Except for the ice, the wind and flames dissipated. Sauron stood here, unable to feel the breath of life around him for a long time. Except for himself and Mr. Ninja King beside him, there was no breath of life around him. Sauron! Suddenly Chopper's voice shouted. Sauron looked up at the pyramid building. I saw Chopper transforming into a reindeer form, carrying Usopp and Luffy and jumping all the way over. Chopper jumping in reindeer form is really nice. Chopper led Usopp and Luffy all the way to the bottom of the pyramid building. Chopper put the two down and transformed into human form. Usopp, Chopper and Luffy all ran over quickly. Zoran, how is Rog? Chopper asked loudly. Don't tell me, he was killed, Luffy shouted angrily. Usopp rushed over and looked at Zoro. He then looked at Mr. King of Ninja, who was standing aside. Mr. Ninja King also turned sideways deliberately to indicate that he did not want to fight. Sauron looked at the three of them with unspeakable expressions on his face. Under such an explosion, the chance of survival is very low. But I didn't find any trace of him, Zoro said. Hearing this, Chopper's face became extremely ugly and said, No. It can't be. You lied, Luffy yelled angrily. Luffy waved his hand and shouted, Rog wants to fight side by side with us and explore the Grand Route together. How can you die like this? Luffy immediately moved away from Sauron and started looking around. Hey Roger, stop playing hide and seek. Come out quickly. Luffy searched for Rog in the surrounding gravel and ice. Chopper turned into a reindeer form again, lay down, and smelled it with his nose. The explosion here just now was very violent, and the taste was severely damaged. However, thanks to his keen sense of smell, Chopper managed to find some. Chopper repeatedly smelled it in this area for a long time. How did you find it? Usopp walked to Chopper and asked. The temperature suddenly disappeared, as if people evaporated, Chopper said. Usopp rested his hand on his chin, thinking. The person disappeared suddenly, but Rog was still wearing that armor no matter what. It's impossible to be blown up to ashes. Could it be? Usopp looked at Kong Dangjang. Usopp suddenly clapped his hands and said, by the way, Rog was probably blown away. It blew up, Chopper, level Zoro and Luffy said in surprise. Usopp put on a well-informed look again and said, because Captain Usopp has a very strong shooting ability. So I understand that after being exploded, the probability of objects flying away is extremely high. Some things explode, it's not bad, but it may have been blown away by the force of the explosion. After hearing this, Chopper felt that it made sense and said, this is indeed possible. Zoro also heard Usopp's conclusion, and he said, this is not unreasonable. Look over there in the city. Everyone looked towards the urban area far away from the pyramid. The many broken stones and ice blocks produced by the explosion just now were thrown there by the power of the explosion. Zoro continued, with so many rocks and ice, Rog is very likely to be able to get there without being blown away. I really hope so, Usopp said. After hearing this, Luffy seemed to understand. But he still said, that means Rog is still alive. Right. It's just that the probability is high, Usopp said. I hope so, Chopper said. Luffy's chest jumped up and he said, that's great. He danced to celebrate the hand in hand. Chopper quickly warned, be careful of your wounds. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 227. Chopper quickly stopped Luffy. But everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Rog's chances of surviving are still very high. At this moment, Sauron suddenly felt an unusual aura, which was a familiar companion. That's... Zoro looked towards the city. Usopp and the others also watched. I saw a man who was a little staggering walking over. It wasn't until he reached the opposite side of the moat that he could see clearly. Roger. Usopp and the others shouted happily. Everyone is fine, that's great, Rog said happily after seeing Usopp and the others. Rog was now covered in injuries and even staggered a bit when he moved. Part of the moat ahead was also frozen, and Rog walked over it. Roger finally reunited with his companions. Just as Rog and Usopp were having their round, they were on a brick in the pyramid building. The spring water goddess reluctantly climbed up. In front of him were the 3 axes that had fallen. I destroyed him, spring water goddess said. The goddess of spring water was still immersed in the powerful magic attack that she could not accurately control. But when her eyes glanced at the ground below the pyramid building, she stopped quickly. A figure that should not exist is there. She quickly recognized that figure. Although she was wearing a walnut armor before, she could recognize that kind of temperament. No, it's impossible, spring water goddess said in shock. She couldn't believe it. No matter what, such a powerful magic attack didn't destroy the opponent. Under the pyramid building, Rog told Usopp why he survived. After hearing this, Usopp said, so that's how it is. Luffy said happily, okay, as long as you don't die. Chopper walked into Rog, observed Rog's body and said, let me help you heal. You have suffered a lot of injuries. At this moment, everyone suddenly saw a piece of brick from the pyramid building. The spring water goddess used magic and floated over. The spring water goddess also placed the 3 axes, the gold axe, the silver axe, and the iron axe, on her left arm just as she did when she first appeared. Rog and Usopp saw spring water goddess slowly floating and landing in front of everyone. The spring water goddess looked at everyone calmly, but there was no will to fight in her eyes. Meeting you in this battle really made me realize that seemingly ordinary people also have very powerful abilities, spring water goddess said very gently. Everyone was confused by the huge contrast between the gentleness of spring water goddess and the powerful magic attack before. The seemingly gentle spring water goddess is capable of powerful attacks that defy the heavens. It's unbelievable. The goddess of spring water looked at Rog and said, you are really powerful. You can still survive after being hit by that kind of attack. Rog looked directly at spring water goddess. This time he seemed to be able to really feel that the other party had no will to fight. Thank you for the compliment. It's really an honor for me to be able to monitor the magic of the Magic Island, Rog said. The spring goddess looked at Mr. Ninja King again. The two nodded to each other. Mr. Ninja King also came out and stood next to spring water goddess. The goddess of spring water looked at Rog and said, you have won this battle. Mr. Ninja King said, okay, we won't fight you anymore. Then we leave. Rog, Sauron, Usopp, and others all looked at them together. Okay, but can I ask some questions? Rog said. You ask, spring water goddess said. Is Crocodile here? Rog asked. He is not here, said the spring goddess. After hearing this, Rog also confirmed his own thoughts. There was a fierce battle in this pyramid building before, but crocodile was not seen. There is no doubt that crocodile is not here. After all, this pyramid building is the headquarters of Crocodile's consortium. It can be said that it is really unjustifiable for Crocodile himself to not appear in such a fierce battle here. So the most plausible explanation is that Crocodile is not here. After Rog's idea was confirmed, he asked again, "So, what did Crocodile do?" The goddess of spring water seemed a little unable to answer. Mr. Ninja King said, "Let me tell you this. Crocodile seems to be heading to the east. That is to the east of the Rain Land. And to the east is the Sundara River. From there, you can reach it by taking a boat south. The southern sea of Alabasta. But if you cross the Sundara River and continue eastward, you will be in the direction of Aruba. I don't know more about these two routes." When Rog and Sauron heard this crucial news, their faces became serious. Where is Crocodile going? This is a critical period of the civil war in Alabasta, and it is impossible to go south and overseas. If you continue eastward to Arupana, that is the base camp of the king's army. Rog said to the two of them, "No matter what, thank you very much." Mr. Ninja King said, "You don't need so many courtesy, you can't make a deal without fighting. We are very destined." Spring Water Goddess said, "This failure has taught us a lesson. I have also become more aware of the use of power. Mr. Ninja King, we can truly break away from Baroque Studio." Mr. Ninja King said, "Okay, we can leave Baroque Studio." Usopp looked at the two of them and said strangely, "What's going on with leaving Baroque Studio?" Mr. Ninja King said, "It's like this. Spring Water Goddess and I have both encountered Crocodile before. At that time, he made a contract with us. That is, as long as we defeat him, we can continue to do it. It's our own business. If we can't defeat him, we need to do something for him. Of course, we all lose in the end. But even if we join Baroque Studio, we are considered a kind of special agent whose status is parallel to that of senior agents. And for Baroque Studio we can get generous rewards by doing things. Of course, once we encounter a strong enemy and fail, we can choose to quit. Because Crocodile knows that we are all from an outstanding group, he cherishes his reputation and commitment, so he also reuses us. Now if you lose, then there is no need to stay in Baroque Studio." Mr. Ninja King explained the cause and effect of the matter clearly. Rog and the others suddenly realized after hearing this. "It turned out to be like this," Usopp said. "You are really outstanding people, even with bad people, you still value promises," Sauron said in admiration. "It looks like this, so I'm really lucky to meet you." "We have also grown a lot," Rog said. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 229. "I need your support at any time," Rog said to Usopp and the others. Rog turned his head back and looked at MS's fingers. "But now we are obviously a little tired." Rog himself had gone through a long and fierce battle and looked very tired and injured. Mr. Ninja King and Spring Water Goddess were both seriously exhausted after a fierce battle. Luffy suffered a lot of injuries during the battle, and his Rubber Man attributes did not have an advantage over his opponents, and were even restrained. On the contrary, although Chopper and Usopp have gone through a long battle, they are basically not injured, and they can also provide certain support. The fingers of the opponent are now filled with a strong will to fight and are well prepared. The enemy in the battle are to some extent equal in power. One side is tired but outnumbered, the other side is at its best and strong. Rog is now covered in injuries, and the walnut-heavy armor has been scrapped. It can be said that it is even more difficult to defeat the opponent now. But even so, you have to fight with all your strength. "Humph, even though there are so many of you, you are still no match for me," MS said with both hands. MS first stretched her arms with her fingers, and she began to use the plant fruit ability in her body. The two arms quickly stretched and became sharp and hard, turning into two 3-meter-long spears. "Okay, I will use the thorn spear to destroy you," MS roared with both hands while waving her arms to turn into two thorn spears and stab the front. Rog waved the Kinkan bamboo spear in his hand to meet the thorn spear on the left. Mr. Ninja King used his ninja sword to block the thorn spear on the right. Chiang chiang. There was an ear-piercing crash. The two thorn spears were successfully blocked. MS withdrew the two thorn spears with both fingers and stabbed again. Rog and Mr. Ninja King tried to block with their weapons. "Do you think I don't have any means of long-range attacks in melee combat?" MS suddenly said with her fingers. At this moment, MS suddenly opened her mouth with her fingers. The tongue sticks out from her mouth, but it grows rapidly, stretching into a spike as long as a bow and arrow. Thorn tongue and arrow. MS the black spikes turned into tongues from both hands shot out. Like a bow and arrow shot by a powerful knight, it shot towards Mr. Ninja King. Mr. Ninja King was caught off guard. Although he evaded at the critical moment, he was still shot on the side of his right chest. Mr. Ninja King half knelt down in pain. Rog looked at Mr. Ninja King, only to see that suddenly MS's fingers and arms turned into thorn spears and stabbed Mr. Ninja King. "Be careful," Rog suddenly used the Kinkan bamboo spear in his hand to resist. While Rog was desperately resisting, MS Spring Water Goddess rushed to Mr. Ninja King's side and helped him up. "Are you okay?" MS Spring Water Goddess asked. Mr. the King of Ninja gritted his teeth and touched the wound on the side of the right side of his chest, and pulled out the spike with a sharp pull. "Fortunately, it's not toxic." Mr. Ninja King quickly took out a pill from the bag on his waist and took it. It's an emergency pain relief and anti-inflammatory pill that keeps the body going during critical moments. "Thank you, I can continue fighting," Mr. Ninja King said as he stood up forcefully. He had been seriously injured in the battle with Zoro just now, and now he was stabbed by MS's fingers, which could be said to be worse. However, Mr. Ninja King is a ninja from the country of Wano, and he has lived in harsh training since he was a child. Having experienced hundreds of battles, there are too many scars on his body to count. Although he has suffered a lot of injuries now, he still has to fight bravely. MS the goddess of spring water looked at him with a somewhat unbearable expression. "I will support you with magic," MS Spring Water Goddess said. Mr. Ninja King nodded and said, "Okay, thank you very much." Mr. Ninja King continues to observe his opponent and prepare for battle. There are many powerful weapons used by ninjas in the bag around his waist. Coupled with his ninja fighting methods, he can deal a heavy blow to the powerful enemy in front of him. MS the goddess of spring water also held 3 axes and prepared to attack. Although the battle just now almost exhausted her energy, she can still provide some support now. At this time, Rog wielded the Kinkan bamboo spear and fought fiercely with MS's 2 fingers. Because of the previous battles and consumption, Rog is now holding on. Although he holds the Kinkan bamboo spear tightly in his hand, he almost always resists the thorny spears that the opponent's arms turn into in between life and death. Chiang 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 chiang. For a while, the two sides fought with spears, and Rog finally couldn't hold it anymore, and took a few steps back. After Rog was obviously suppressed, MS also had a charming smile on her hands and face. "What a turn of events. You were so powerful last time. I ran away in disgrace. This time you will die without a burial place," MS said with 2 fingers. Her mouth opened again, her tongue sticking out. Her tongue elongated rapidly and became sharp and hard. Become as sharp as a bow and arrow. Rog felt a chill in his heart when he saw the state of MS's fingers. "I am afraid that my own end is at hand." Thorn tongue and arrow. Explosive shuriken. Just when MS was about to shoot out the fatal spike with her fingers, a shuriken suddenly flew over. What is different from the shuriken used by Mr. Ninja King before is that this shuriken has a ball in the middle. The shuriken exploded near the head of MS's hands. The sharp spike was also shot, but it missed and hit the ground on Rog's left side. Rog looked at MS's hands ahead, whose head was shrouded in the smoke of the explosion. Mr. Ninja King jumped to Rog's side. "You're fine," Roger said. "Thank you, no matter what. Now we are fighting side by side," Mr. Ninja King said. The two people then glanced at MS's fingers in front of them, as the smoke cleared. The fingers of both hands are now ahead of Black Char. "Okay, I didn't stab you to death just now. Now I will send you to the west together," MS said with both hands. "Use your fingers to change your arms again this time." First, both arms were restored. Then the two arms quickly changed, and finally turned into two triple-mounted machine guns. "You should be familiar with this weapon." "Thorn machine gun," MS said with both hands. She quickly raised two triple-mounted Thorn machine guns and pointed them at Rog and Mr. Ninja King. Rog looked at these two weapons, and he knew very well how powerful these two weapons were. In the last battle in the desert, these two Thorn machine guns forced him to use the ace equipment of the walnut heavy armor. But what is extremely bad now is that the walnut armor has been destroyed. A powerful penetrating weapon that confronts this continuity. I'm afraid I have no way to compete.